Yeah. As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Harry. That melodious voice you hear is Harry, our station manager. And I mentioned this at the top of each show that WNHH 103.5 FM could exist without Harry, but we exist in a more vibrant and resonant fashion because of his station management expertise. So Harry, a continual shout out to you. I'm just glad that your commitment to what community radio is all about, as well as what community information is all about. We're going to talk today about community information and community. If I can just get my camera straight here. Topic of today's show is it might be somewhat abstract, but it's really real. Dr. Naeem Nassiri is with me, and Dr. Nassiri, I spoke with 4 or 5 friends this week. I like to kind of like casually mention what the show's all about, the upcoming show, because again, this topic is somewhat detailed and specific, and all 4 of them mentioned. As soon as I mentioned aortic aneurysms, all 4 of them mentioned that someone in their immediate family or close relative had died from an aneurysm. It just knocked my socks off. Two black folks and two white folks and a younger person, and the age span. One person lost her husband when he was maybe 26 or 27. One person lost his father when his father was 63, 64. Another person mentioned there were 3 people in their family. So I say that to say that we're going to talk about aortic aneurysms, the silent killer. And it's a silent killer, but it's also, it prevails. It's a prevailing killer, and it's not unique in any way. My guests today are Dr. Naeem Nassiri. Dr. Nassiri is Associate Professor of Surgery, Yale University School of Medicine, the Aortic Institute at Yale New Haven Hospital, co-director of the Vascular Malformations Program, and Chief Vascular and Endovascular Surgery at VA Connecticut Healthcare System. I mentioned that just to kind of indicate the scope and breadth of his involvement, his research, his dedication to this field. And I'm joined by really 2, I would say, there's no question spiritual servants, but they're also people servants. Reverend Dr. Leroy Perry Jr. Dr. Perry is pastor of St. Stephen's AME Zion Church and cultural ambassador to the Yale Clinical Research Program. And that's his church is located in Brantford. And I'm also joined by Reverend Elvin Clayton, pastor of Walters Memorial AME Zion Church and cultural ambassador to the Yale Clinical Research Program, which is located in Bridgeport. So if you're in Connecticut and you're looking for a church home, I'll put the pitch out for you, Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry. Stop by there. Dr. Nassiri, let's jump right in, because I say this is a detailed topic, and we're going to talk about detailed things, maybe use some medical vernacular that you may be unfamiliar with. But again, the purpose of this show is just to bring awareness to every aspect of what your health, taking charge of your health, understanding your health provider. And we're really blessed to have doctors and servants such as Dr. Nassiri on the show this morning to really let us know that he's not he's touchable, he's transparent, he's not up in any Yale ivory tower. So Dr. Nassiri was saying that, what is your practice like currently in this busy as a busy vascular surgeon at Yale New Haven Hospital? What's it like?
Well, good morning, first of all, and I just wanted to thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to talk about this important topic that touches many folks in a variety of different communities, and it is absolutely a silent killer, and it's important to raise awareness in a variety of different settings in the community. I'm a vascular surgeon at Yale. I'm also a chief of vascular surgery at the VA Connecticut Healthcare System, as you mentioned. Currently, my practice focuses on the minimally invasive and really cutting edge treatment of really complex, the more complicated varieties of aneurysms, not only in the abdominal aorta, which is in sort of the belly area, but also in the chest and the area that connects the chest to the belly. These are some of the most challenging and most lethal locations where aneurysms can occur. And so the treatment for these things has traditionally been fraught with complications and not the best outcomes. And our focus is on really trying to minimize the risk of these operations and to be able to offer these operations by using cutting edge technology, by using minimally invasive technology and techniques, to be able to offer this surgery to patients who may traditionally have not been candidates for this kind of operation given their age or other frail status and other medical comorbidities. So that's one of the major pillars of my practice currently at Yale.
Excellent. And I just wanted to mention to our listeners and our viewers, kind of Google Dr. Nasseri's name. Go, if I can say that, Dr. Nasseri, go to the YouTube channel. There's some presentations that he's given if you want more detailed information, because it's really fascinating to see medical information is now available. I mean, you don't have to kind of go to a grand round at Yale Medical. You can hear it on YouTube. And I was listening to some of your presentations over the weekend, and it's insightful. And science is a discovery episode. So what we know today, we're looking for more information tomorrow. But tell us, Dr. Nasseri, just step back for a second. What is an aortic aneurysm?
A great question. It's a great place to start. You know, an aneurysm, put simply, is a bulge or an abnormal dilatation of essentially any blood vessel. But one of the blood vessels that gets affected most frequently is the aorta. The aorta is this candy cane shaped structure. It's the major highway of blood flow in the body. It emerges from the heart and basically gives blood supply to all our organs from our head all the way down to our toes. And so it's really you can think of it as the major highway of blood flow, and everything else branches off of it. And so in that major highway, that's this tube, this candy cane structure, or candy cane shaped structure, if there's an abnormal bulge or dilatation, there can be devastating, catastrophic, and potentially lethal bursting of that bulge, kind of like a bulge that happens in a tire of a car. And if it bursts, it can lead to almost immediate death from uncontrollable hemorrhage. So that's what.
Yeah. So and when people talk about that, the silent killer aspect of it, it strikes quickly. And I just wanted to say, folks, that again, it's Monday, October 25th, and 2021, and there's so much going on in the world, and sometimes you can feel depressed or not inspired. But this show is not about morbidity. This show is about health and survival. And so view and listen to these remaining 45 minutes, I think, in that context, that it's not kind of a Howard Hill funeral home commercial show. On the contrary, it's a life-giving show that. And that's the key, and I think you'd agree with that, Dr. Nasseri. In that vein, your commitment to clinical research. Share with us just a sidebar why you have this commitment to clinical research in this area. I mean, that's really fascinating too.
Well, that's a great question. You know, as a surgeon, as a busy surgeon, you get to a point in your practice that, you know, whether you're a scientifically oriented doctor, meaning that you have a dedicated research lab, or you're just a busy surgeon, it gets to a point where you ask yourself, can we do things better? Or how can we do these things better? And you know, you can be a very busy surgeon or a very busy practitioner and see tons and tons of patients, but that busy practice eventually turns into a scenario where you ask yourself, well, you know, why are things being done this way? I wonder, what if? Or you keep your eyes and ears open and you see where technology is going. You ask yourself, I wonder if this, for example, seemingly irrelevant technological advancement can be applied to what I'm doing and to my patients. And so these are really the beauty of why I would like to practice at a place like Yale and have collaboration with centers such as the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation that enables doctors like me to ask those questions, but then take it to the next step and implement research pathways where we can figure out how we can implement these things and be able to answer those questions. And of course, with the help and collaboration of patients, all in the attempt to be able to advance medicine and move it forward and help save lives.
So key, and just to kind of to piggyback on that a little bit. Although we're using this phrase "silent killer," what if anything should people be aware of, the regular person such as myself in this regard?
I encourage everybody who's listening to this show is to really take personal responsibility for their care and not necessarily rely on, even your doctor to take care of it. Ask questions. We're in the era of information technology. See what the risk factors are. Ask yourself, is there anything I can do to help mitigate those risk factors? You mentioned earlier during the show that there were a handful of people that you spoke to, and they had relatives. If you have a relative who's had an aneurysm, not only in the aorta, but elsewhere in the body, I behoove you to seek out your medical doctor, look out for a vascular surgeon, and see what can be done to screen you potentially for this ticking time bomb that may be living inside you. I think vascular surgery is a very niche and specialized specialty in medicine, and we're not a huge specialty, but we do tend to touch the lives of many patients. And so I encourage everybody who are listening to this show is to reach out to your vascular surgeon and ask what you can do to help mitigate some of these risk factors, because a lot of the risk factors that lead to aneurysms can also lead to other devastating issues such as stroke, blood clots in legs, blockages in the blood vessels all over the body that could potentially lead to other really bad things like amputations and other really sad things. So I encourage everybody to really take personal responsibility and see what the risk factors are and help mitigate those things.
Just before I go to Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, and you reference risk factors, even if you repeat what you've just said, what are some of those? Because I think when people hear, I mean, we know that in terms of the current public health crisis, people are hearing what they want to hear and acting on what they want to act on. So sometimes when I do these shows, it gets frustrating, but I'm just committed to just sticking to my guns and standing my ground. So some of the risk factors that you referenced, if you want to elaborate or just even or repeat, that are
Sure.
that are associated with this condition.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, and probably the most important, is a genetic predisposition. So, if someone is a first degree relative has something like this, that's probably the most important. But I would say the second most important is smoking, use of tobacco, regardless of what route it is consumed, whether it's via smoking or chewing or other varieties of receiving that compound. Then there are multiple other risk factors that touches the lives of specific communities more than others. For example, high blood pressure is a notorious risk factor for propagating aneurysms. And then alterations in lipid panels, cholesterol levels, all those things that traditionally lead to heart disease, with perhaps the exception of diabetes, but all those other things that you hear folks talk about, in addition to smoking and believe it or not, male sex tends to be a risk factor. Males are a bit more affected with this than our female counterparts. But these are all risk factors for development of aneurysm. But I'll say that, and I'll end with this. The female patient population, whilst probably a little bit less affected in terms of numbers, they can have much more devastating outcomes pertaining to their aneurysm. So they can rupture at a smaller diameter, and they tend to do worse with smaller caliber aneurysms. So that I don't want our female listeners to think that that this does not affect them either. So those are some of the more important things that I think folks should be aware of.
Your comments earlier are still sticking with me and running through my head about, I mean, even this afternoon, you might be performing a surgery, but also what might be going through your head is, what can I do to stop having to perform this type of surgery? So just that scientific research, that plumber, how can I stop the flood, but also stop the pipe, that plumber innovation kind of nexus just still kind of gets really fascinates me with people in your profession. So I salute you. Before I go to Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, Dr. Nassiri, I just wanted to ask you about the, because I want to have folks not be totally sombered and pessimistic. What are some of the, if there are some latest treatment options? Are there any treatment options for patients with aortic aneurysms?
Yeah, I'll end this on a very positive note. I'm actually very pleased to let folks know that, here at Yale and also elsewhere in the country, we're really pushing the envelope in terms of being able to offer life-saving maneuvers to patients who otherwise would not have been candidates for really some of these complex aneurysms. We've had several patients who are seeking second, third, fourth opinions from us who were told previously that they should seek hospice care or there's really no other options for them. This last Friday, we actually did a gentleman, African-American gentleman, had multiple risk factors, really severe high blood pressure. And he was actually a younger guy in his 60s. And he was basically told that there's really no other options for him. And we were able to perform a very slick and minimally invasive approach with just two needle sticks in his groin and a tiny little cut in the arm. We were able to perform an operation which previously would have required him being, I apologize, but for lack of a better word, cut open from his chest all the way down to his pubic bone and basically opened up a really invasive and morbid operation. But we were able to perform this for him in the least invasive manner. And we were just so excited about what the technology has. And we're there right now. This is not just some theoretical thing in the future that we're hoping for. We are there in terms of being able to offer these really cutting edge stuff. So I encourage folks to really seek out folks that are really pushing the envelope in a positive way and ask about those outcomes and what's happening with medicine, with vascular surgery this day and age.
Excellent. That's really helpful. Reverend Clayton, Reverend Perry, how you guys doing?
Doing fine, Tom.
Good.
Fine.
Reverend Clayton, let me kind of start with you because Dr. Nassiri has kind of indicated the issue of personal research, personal, I would say, dedication, personal responsibility, but also just keeping your mind and your eyes and your ears open and researching and talking to people and just communing. I mean, that's why I love doing this show. But unfortunately, there's still some folks that seem to avoid healthcare, even when they need it. And the Yale, the Cultural Ambassador Program has been committed to this for more than a decade. But from your perspective and your perspective, and this is for Reverend Perry, this is for you as well. What can, if anything, healthcare providers do to encourage members of the African American community to seek the care they need when it comes to vascular health? In this case, but I mean, obviously in general, but in this case, in terms of vascular health, is there anything that the healthcare community can do, and how can we encourage the African American community to kind of just seize the time, seize the moment, understand that life is precious? Reverend Clayton, let me start with you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. And Dr. Nassiri, thank you for being with us today. What an informative piece of work you've shared with us thus far. First of all, health equity is when everybody in our society has a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. But I would like to suggest that healthcare providers, if they would take the time to figure out how to speak with community leaders and members of the community at large to determine the barriers that are preventing minorities and low-income persons from acquiring quality health care. Now, we know that good education can lead to a better employment, and employment can lead to better housing. But transportation is an issue in many areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
And even when some of these persons have insurance, they may not be able to take the time from work to get the type of treatment that they need. So accessibility to healthcare is vital for this area, I believe.
Excellent. Reverend Perry, good morning. How are you doing, sir?
Doing fine, Tom. And
good to see you, man.
Yes, good to see you. And Dr. Nassari, I find this fascinating. I find it fascinating and at the same time mind-boggling, because the issue is not for our community, for individuals who may want to seek out this kind of service when it's needed. Is how do we get them to seek out this kind of information and services prior to the point when it's right on the line. And I think being on this show today helps us to at least start that pathway of discussion. You mentioned some things like genetics and screenings and, finding the opportunity to find doctors who would give or have this information. I think that's where the problem really is. How do we bring this cutting edge information to a community? How do we get them? I mean, genetic screening is costly. I can't even afford 23andMe. How do we get our community into this realm? And if COVID has taught us nothing, we know that this community is the most vulnerable community. And reaching this community is very, very difficult, even for us as ambassadors. So we've got a number of things that we're trying to do with newsletters and this Ficklin show. But I believe that this pales in comparison to where we need to be and how we need to get there. There is no sign at Yale saying, come in for a screening for aneurysms or come in for genetic testing. I agree with you in terms of what we need to do in terms of taking charge of our health. That's one of the things we're doing with YCCI. The smoking, the eating properly, the getting the right amount of sleep. I mean, all of these things are important. But, it's really kind of hard to reach people who are working every day, who live in poverty or who are marginalized, even think about this as a serious issue for them. In your research, have you been able to identify resources at the school or in your projects that we might be able to elicit from our community individuals to be screened genetically or otherwise? Or, because there is an issue of money, it's an issue of power. And if you don't have either one, you're at the bottom and you may remain there, even though the science is there. Tuskegee, they didn't give them the vaccine, but they had the vaccine. So if we can't get the vaccine, if we don't have access to the health, then what good is this stuff for us?
I agree. I think one of the things that I can suggest is our society, the Society for Vascular Surgery, does a fantastic job of offering information online about aneurysms to all patients. And there are screening programs that are available through it. I completely agree with you. And I think one of the things that we struggle with as vascular surgeons is that by virtue of our specialty being one of the smaller specialties and being so focused and specialized, we too also lack the lobbying capabilities and the voice to be able to get out there in the community as much as we can. I think partnership with entities such as the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation, such as yourselves, would be a tremendous opportunity and learning point for us physicians to get involved and be able to get the word out to more vulnerable communities who actually, as you stated, whilst they may not have necessarily all the resources that one would need to seek out these entities, they are the ones that are most affected by it. And oftentimes it's not until it's very late where we come across some of these patients. And so it's not until it's ruptured where we actually have to go in and intervene. And in those situations, we know that we have, if that happens in the hospital, there's about a 50% mortality. If it happens outside the hospital, it's close to 90% mortality if an aneurysm ruptures. So I think getting that awareness out, I encourage all of us to really partner with entities such as the Society for Vascular Surgery, who is really engaged on a very high level, even in terms of lobbying to Washington, and to be able to get the word out to folks about what we're dealing with and talking about here. So thank you for bringing all these points up to the show here.
And Dr. Nassiri, if I might, just to kind of piggyback on really the cogent comments that Dr. Perry and Reverend Clayton have shared. We've mentioned this term screening, but talk to me from a regularity or periodic standpoint. How often should we ask your doc? Should I ask my doctor to screen for aortic aneurysms? What's the process there? Or should any age groups even be particularly concerned about screening?
I would say folks who have risk factors that we talked about earlier, such as smoking, heavy history of hypertension, high blood pressure, hypercholesterolemia, hyperlipids, triglycerides, things of that nature, those folks should really partner very closely with their primary care doctors and should ask them about the risk factors for aneurysms. The current recommendations right now from the Society of Vascular Surgery is that anyone who's ever touched a cigarette, anyone over the age of 60 who's ever touched a cigarette or who's had a first-degree relative with an aortic aneurysm can and should get a one-time screening ultrasound to look for an aneurysm. And that's a very minimally invasive, non-invasive means of being able to look for things. I got to tell you, one of the entities where I work that does a phenomenal job, and this too is also a very vulnerable and at-risk and relatively underserved community, is the Veterans Affairs healthcare system. We're very proud of what we've been able to do for the veterans here. And this is a population that, is a heavy user of tobacco. Obviously the age category kind of comes into the picture as well. But the primary care team here at the VA Connecticut healthcare system does a phenomenal job of screening these veterans, and we see tons of aneurysms and that we are able to detect that we would not have detected otherwise. And they're very good about referring those patients. So I encourage the primary care providers who, for example, advanced nurse practitioners, family physicians, internists, cardiologists, folks who are managing this vulnerable group of patients, is to seek out and identify vascular surgical partners who can work with you and give you recommendations in terms of what to do. That element of communication is also very important from the primary care provider, who wind up really being the gatekeepers, to the vascular surgeons, who tend to really be focusing on the highly specialized area. That communication is also very important.
And this might seem self-evident, but again, I used to think it's self-evident that we should try to protect ourselves and get a shot. But I talk to friends that just understand that their perception of what is self-evident is not mine. So let me get to the point. What are the benefits of early detection? I mean, I think we just got to pound this podium as loud as we can. Are there any benefits for early detection and treatment?
Saving your life. I mean, yes. Simply stated, this is not like high blood pressure or diabetes. Even those are slowly lethal entities. This is something that we find 5.5, 6.5 centimeter aneurysm. I mean, a 5.5 to 6.5 centimeter aneurysm has about 5 to 10% risk of rupture every year. So if you think about it, that's not a number you want to forget about it. As we start to get to about 7 to 8 centimeters of abdominal aortic aneurysm, we're talking about roughly 40% annual risk of rupture. So just under 50%, it's like a toss of the coin that this thing will burst. And if it happens outside of the hospital that is capable of taking care of these problems, you're talking about a 90% mortality rate, which is astonishing. And so the benefit is to really a life-saving maneuver.
And when you mentioned ultrasound, so does the ultrasound actually detect how large or how small these aneurysms might be?
Yes, sir. It definitely can detect. The most important thing with the ultrasound is the detection of whether or not one exists. And then at that point, I would really encourage a formal referral to a vascular surgeon if that ultrasound was ordered by a non-vascular surgeon, and then allowing the vascular surgeon to determine what is the next step, whether we need to continue to do surveillance with risk factor modification, counseling on smoking cessation, genetic testing, and something as simple as just taking a very detailed and thorough history of the patient, establishing that relationship with the patient, educating the patient on what the expected outcome is, and then seeing these patients regularly, and then from there on out, determining whether you need to get a CT scan or other imaging that may give you more information, and then talk about potential treatment options, which have really gone down the route of minimally invasive approaches, and we've really pushed the envelope in that regard. And so the technology and the skill set to be able to deliver really minimally invasive, cutting edge treatment options for this very advanced and potentially lethal disease has really blossomed over the last 5 to 10 years.
And Reverend Perry has referenced the economic implications of everything, but particularly in terms of the medical healthcare system. And I've recently had 2 ultrasounds. Well, I shouldn't say, in the last 7 months, I've had 2 ultrasounds. And when I've seen the bill, yes, my insurance has covered much of it. But the economic, this is really fascinating, the cost of our medical care. And you know, I hear this term triage a lot, Reverend Dr. Nassiri. I guess what I'm stumbling to try to ask you without putting you too much on the spot is, are there some doctors that, because of the economic implication, are there some doctors that would discriminate about who should get an ultrasound? I know it's kind of a crass question, but it seems to me that it does occur.
You know, I would probably be the wrong person to ask that. And this is why I practice at a place like Yale and also the Veterans Affairs Hospital, because I didn't want to worry about, I want to see the patient and I want to take care of the patient, and I want to give the same cutting edge, high quality care to anyone who walks into my door, regardless of, when patients even ask me about insurance billings and things like that, I just direct them to my administration, because, you know, practicing at Yale, I just focus on the patient and the care that's provided and the research that goes into with that. And then obviously the education of younger doctors as well. So I have never practiced in a setting where I would have to take any of those, socioeconomic factors into consideration. I never wanted to practice that way. And I modeled the way I practice medicine after the who trained me. So it's sad that if that truly does take place, I could imagine systems where that could be happening. But what I can reassure you is that at a place like Yale, for example, we don't turn anybody away. And if someone were to come into the emergency room or to my clinic, the last thing I'm looking at is what kind of insurance they have. And, they're going to get the latest and greatest. In fact, we were the first, the VA Connecticut healthcare system was the first VA in the United States to deploy the latest generation abdominal stent graft. And this is costly stuff. These grafts cost about $10,000, $15,000 per piece, and you're putting 2 to 3 pieces per patient. And we were the first healthcare system in the country to deploy this, and we were very proud of that. And to be able to bring really expensive cutting-edge technology to a population that otherwise would not necessarily have access to it, that's what really gets my juices flowing and me excited. And that patients are very grateful. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, is to be able to improve their quality of life and improve longevity. So I'd probably be the wrong person to ask about that, but I hear what you're saying.
And I appreciate your responding to it with such transparency. Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, on that note, do you guys have any concerns related to access to screenings, particularly for folks that might not have comprehensive health insurance coverage? Reverend Clayton?
Yes, okay. Yeah, that is a major concern, because there are many people who are seriously ill or have died because they were not able to be screened. And as we just been saying, the cost of hospital care and convalescing is very expensive. but that cost is greater, but screening is a lot less, and it has the chance of saving the lives of so many. And with this thought, the state of Connecticut and the federal government have provided coronavirus vaccines at no cost to Americans. So why can't the country provide screenings for Americans without cost? And so why don't we sound the trumpet and put this message on billboards and continue to use the social media like the doctor says, and use television and the radio ads, town hall meetings expressing the importance of these people to be screened for heart disease, diabetes, and the list goes on and on and on. If we would do this, more lives would be saved.
Now, I agree with my colleague, but I think that there are some deeper implications, particularly even within the medical community itself. When I read the book, The Emperor of All Maladies, and when they were doing surgery and they were doing radiation, it was interesting how doctors who did surgery did not want to deal with doctors who were doing radiation. And so it was like, how do you get them together? How do you get the doctors together because if we're talking specialties here, there's some surgeons who may say, oh, I can do this. And there's some doctors who may say, I don't know enough about it, so it doesn't get done. So, I mean, it's a larger problem, I think, and that has to be addressed on both sides, within the medical community and within the community at large. I'm hopeful that that the information pipeline, since it is now internet accessible to everyone, that we, as long as we can get this word out. And Dr. Nassiri, let me just say this to you. You're a very modest guy, and you're a very cautious guy, and you're very kind to your colleagues. So, but at the same time, I think that maybe, you've started here giving voice to something that's significant. Perhaps you can do an article for us for our community magazine, because when we say it, it has the faith side. When you say it, it has the science side. So we're going to put both of those together.
Good point.
And we might be able to start the ball rolling from just this conversation that we're having now. And I think that could be monumental in what we're trying to do in terms of saving lives.
Absolutely.
I would be honored and would love nothing more than to partner with you folks who have such a profound impact in the community to raise awareness. My goal would be, my dream would be to be able to offer really advanced, cutting edge services to patients who need it the most, and then hopefully we can use the successful stories of these patients to even reach out broader communities across the country and even broader than that. And anything I can do to be of assistance. And I will say you hit a very good point earlier, is that it's not just that sort of lack of communication, but one thing that we've been able to try to do is really partner with our colleagues in other specialties. For example, we work very closely with our colleagues in cardiac surgery. So the heart surgeons, as a blood vessel surgeon myself, and the heart surgeons, because the aorta is sort of connected to all these different organs, we take care of these patients who have aneurysms in the chest and the belly. We do these operations together, and we bring two different mindsets together, and the patients are being cared for not just by one surgeon, by two surgeons who have a similar goal and similar passion and similar vision. And then the more you work together with your partners, it's like two circles that were otherwise separate. Otherwise, these circles merge. And then what happens is there's this sort of gray area in the middle that starts to evolve. And I think that's where creation and intuitive development of novelties and new things emerges. And that's the beauty. And there's really nothing more satisfying and in medicine is to really work with someone to check the ego at the door of saying, oh, I did this and I'm progress this, but when you check that ego at the door, the reward that's there at the end of the tunnel is such a profound sense of satisfaction and service that I can't describe it with words. And so we're very blessed, and this is why I like to practice at a place like Yale, where we can check some of these other, financial implications at the door, and really focus on the patient, the patient's loved ones, and then work with our partners. And that, for us as surgeons, it gives you joy, and this is the reason why you went into medical school. And so it winds up being a very fulfilling experience, and we're very blessed to be able to be given the opportunity to be able to do this. I thank God every day that I have this opportunity, even in the midst of the most complex operation. I just, check myself from time to time and say, you're blessed to be here, to be faced with these challenges, and to be able to be given the privilege of taking care of these complex patients with someone who has your back. And so you guys hit on some such very good points, and would love to work with you on that.
Excellent. Well, we have the evidence, so it's and we have the witnesses and the prayer witnesses as well. So we're locked in. We have about 12 or 13 minutes. And I guess I wanted to talk as you were chatting, Dr. Nassiri, because I know you've heard this term, health disparities, so often. Sometimes it becomes in one ear, out the other. People use it so loosely. But I guess wondered whether you thought your work or research addresses some of the health disparities that we all are reasonably familiar with, and particularly the health disparities that we see among different races or ethnicities.
In my specialty, it's funny, it's such a good point. Our specialty, from some, by virtue of what we deal with diseases that tends to affect folks who really come from some of these more vulnerable communities. And so, these are patients who have high blood pressure, high stress in their lives for a variety of different reasons. Not the healthiest of diets, smokers, and it's not just aneurysms, right? These are the same disease processes, these same socioeconomic shortcomings, these same risk factors and genetics. They tend to affect various different body parts. So you can, how to prevent amputation in diabetics, carotid disease that leads to stroke, and those things of that caliber. We've always dealt with that in vascular surgery. And we're sort of at the end of the line, if you will, when other doctors have sort of done what they could and there's really no other option, that's when vascular surgery comes into the picture. So one thing I would really encourage us to do is to give the vascular surgery community, because we've been dealing with this forever. And I think I would encourage our partners like yourselves and our primary care doctors to partner with the vascular surgeons and to get the vascular surgeons' voices out there. And you will be surprised at how readily available and at service they are. It's just sometimes for reasons that you guys all mentioned, and a lot of things that come into the picture, competition from other doctors and some of the other uglier sides of medicine that can showcase itself. The vascular surgery community does not always have the voice. So we also feel like we need a voice to be able to get our word out there in terms of the services that we're able to offer. What's great about vascular surgery is we're not just surgeons with knives. We perform all the minimally invasive angiographic interventions, the endovascular operations, and we can also medically manage the patient. And so we have a three-pronged approach of tackling these life-threatening problems. But we too also need a voice, and that's why I'm so grateful to you guys for bringing me on this show and giving me a voice to be able to get this word out there. So I encourage our patients to remember vascular surgeons and to ask about if their primary care doctor has a vascular surgeon with whom they can work with. And so thank you for giving me this voice.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for your participation and your commitment moving forward. Reverend Perrin, Reverend Clayton, we have about 10 minutes. Any questions that come to mind? I guess kind of maximize, if we will, this really fertile and rich discussion thus far. I just wonder, Reverend Perry, I can always see your brain kind of firing and your synapses firing and your cells kind of connecting with one another. Any thoughts or comments as we kind of close down in the last 9 or so minutes?
Well, I think that one of the things that Dr. Nassiri has helped us with today is the importance of this pre-screening or taking charge of our health. you know, whether or not individuals have primary care physicians who can or will recommend them to a particular doctor or specialty. That's rare. I mean, normally you got to be on, they've got to see evidence that there is something wrong before they make that kind of referral, whether it's urologists or neurologists. I mean, it's rare. So to have this conversation now is important because I think that we can tell individuals, you need to talk to your doctor to ask them, you know, in terms of special care, are they connected with a urologist or, you know, neurosurgeon or any of these specialties? Because we don't get this. We go in for 8 minutes, they see us, and unless they can spot something, we don't get the referral. And that's because the hospital wants to save on money. They don't want to bring in a specialist. They don't figure that this expense might be some expense to you that you may have to pay something down as well. So it's really a tight situation we're in. But a vascular surgeon, in fact, I don't think I've heard that name in years. So, you know, my doctor recently sent me to see a cardiologist, and I went through the nuclear test. I went through a lot of other tests, and I said, okay. And when I looked at the bill, and thank God that I didn't have to pay most of that bill. But again, how do we help people who really need the help? And other than, you know, through just kind of knowledge about smoking, drinking, health, you know, habits, this is where we start. But then we've got to go further with this, and we've got to talk to our primary care physicians about it. And we've got to talk to, you know, different agencies. You know, I would love to see the NAACP and all of our agencies have a session on this, on the importance of taking charge of your health with Dr. Nassiri and others, like Onyema and others, to talk about Marcella and others to talk about, you know, the need to take charge of our health.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Reverend Clayton?
I have maybe perhaps one question. Dr. Nassiri, could you speak a little bit about an aneurysm in the brain?
I would respectfully defer that question to my neurosurgery colleagues. In fact, I can recommend an excellent neurosurgeon to you guys here at Yale that really focuses on that. But brain aneurysms, you know, the aneurysm morphology and the evolution of aneurysms, it's an interconnected pathway, and one can be connected to another. In fact, you know, having aneurysm in one part of the body can definitely put you at risk for having aneurysms elsewhere. And in full transparency, there's many things that we don't know yet. And this is where there's really the science and the investigation at a place like Yale, with collaboration with entities such as YCCI, comes in the picture. But for brain aneurysms, the best person to really go into depth about what's being done for that would be a neurosurgeon with expertise in endovascular neurosurgery or minimally invasive techniques pertaining to that. But what I can tell you is that that's also a devastating, lethal problem. But at that location, you're dealing with things that can be lethal at much smaller sizes. And so the envelope for that element has also been pushed tremendously over the last few years. And whereas before, folks' skulls would have to be opened up to be able to access that portion of the brain, we are now performing very minimally invasive procedures to be able to plug and exclude blood flow to that aneurysm. So if that's detected earlier, that can definitely be something that can be a life-saving maneuver. The problem with that location, obviously, there's really no good screening test that can be done. It's not like you can just readily put an ultrasound probe and find that. I would encourage this sort of conversation to be broadened, as our colleague mentioned earlier, to not just vascular surgeons, but other specialists who deal with aneurysms all over the body. There can be aneurysms in the blood vessels of the heart. There can be aneurysms in the brain, as you mentioned, and everywhere else because of the nature of blood flow. So it's an excellent point and a wonderful topic for discussion.
I have one question, if I can just ask.
Please, Reverend Perry, please.
The mortality rate is 50% if you're in the hospital and 90% if they don't get you to the hospital. So what then is the rate of mortality among minority populations in the Yale health community? That would be the question so that would suggest to me the urgency, for example, of what our work is ahead of us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is, if an abdominal aortic aneurysm, and the numbers I'm quoting pertain to what we have available for abdominal aortic aneurysm. So we're talking about below the diaphragm, above the pubic bone at that particular location. But you can sort of deduce the same level of urgency to other locations as well. But yes, if an aneurysm ruptures in a highly specialized hospital, you're talking about a 50% mortality. If it happens outside, it's about 90%, if not higher. So you're talking about almost certain guaranteed mortality for someone who is not aware that they may have a large aneurysm. And so talk about a male in their 60s who's got some high blood pressure, smokes because of a variety of different stressors, and maybe has a grandmother, grandfather who died of something they couldn't really figure out why. And that particular individual should really think about aneurysms and the risk of aneurysms. Oftentimes patients get frustrated at me and they say, "Well, doc, I've been fine all my life. I've been smoking, is no problem." And the funny thing is, and I tell the patients, I said, it's not a problem until it really is, right? And so the body starts to kind of give you that signal. Everything is okay. I mean, the car is okay until it's not. And then at that point, we really got to think about what we need to do. The other thing I can tell you that is very important, I really hope that we get this message across, is it's not just a one-time screening ultrasound. If we detect some sort of problem, it's very important for patients to remain compliant and remain in touch with their vascular surgeon and not just forget about it. If we recommend that you come back in 6 months, 3 months, or a year to either get another ultrasound or get a CT scan, I cannot emphasize how important that is. It perhaps is the most important thing. I mean, you may have loved ones that may need you, but if you're not healthy, if you're not good, you're not going to be able to take care of these folks. So while I would obviously applaud the selflessness involved in that, I would say that it's more selfless to get this done, to take care of this so that you can be there for your loved ones, so that you can go back to work and be functional. We don't want you walking around with a 5, 6, 7 centimeter aneurysm lifting 20, 30, 40 pound weights. And these are things that are very important. So those are venues for potential collaboration with you folks as well, with the medical community.
Indeed. Gentlemen, we have about 30 seconds. So Harry's going to play the music, and that'll mean that it's all over. But I guess I wanted to mention, just if you're interested in further information about clinical trials, et cetera, just in your search bar, help us discover. Just type in the words "help us discover" in your computer search bar, your laptop search bar, your phone search bar, and you get information. And then 877-978-8343, 877-978-8343 is the telephone number to find out more about clinical trials. And really gets the community is on trial. We are on trial, and we don't want to be sentenced to be guilty. We want to be sentenced for freedom. So join this community. Become the judge of yourself and judge of others. Dr. Nassiri, any kind of closing remarks? Because Harry will kind of play the music, and I like to push the envelope and maximize every second that we have on the air.
It's an honor to be here, and it's a pleasure to talk with you folks. Hopefully we can continue to work together to pushing this forward.
Excellent. Reverend Perry?
No, I thank you, Dr. Nassiri. I learned a lot today, and I'm definitely going to push the envelope.
Excellent. Reverend Clayton?
Thank you, Dr. Nassiri. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, guys.
It's been a well-informed show today.
Excellent. Harry, over to you, and just thank you, gentlemen, and let's just keep it going. And let's stay healthy and stay alive and stay prosperous.
Thank you.
Yeah. As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road, lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Yeah, this is my road, lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. Way too long, we faced them storms, now you gon' face the dawn.